There's no greater joy than reuniting a father and child. I'm father's rights attorney Jeffery Leving. I protect the rights of fathers and re-engage them in positive relationships with their children so their children don't end up targets looking for an arrow. And it's very sad, very frightening. Many give up hope and walk away and give up on their children. And I strongly encourage them to never give up and not give up hope and be there for their children, no matter how difficult it is, because if they walk away or if they allow the system to kick them away without pursuing every legal right they have, their children suffer. These are important cases where the lives of children often hang in the balance based on what a lawyer does or does not do.
He has written 3 books, the latest praised by President Obama and Cardinal Francis George, and he has co-authored legislation seeking social reform.
The key piece of advice is don't feel guilty and don't give up hope. Courage is critical because a lot of fathers give up. They're afraid to even go into a courtroom because they feel they can't win. They see themselves as targets looking for an arrow. Maybe that's because many of them are. Right. But if they give up hope, they don't seek out justice, it's a guarantee they're probably going to lose. So they should not give up hope, especially when it's affecting the future of their children, the safety of their children. You know, when a dad tells me I had to leave, the mother was hitting me, she stabbed me, she was physically abusive to me, I had to get out of there. What about your 3-year-old that you left with her? If she's going to physically abuse you, what about your 3-year-old? So we have to look at this globally. And I know it's hard to do. It's very emotional. It's hard to look at this globally, but we have to, because the safety and future of children often hang in the balance.
I tried to be half the father as my father was, you know, and I had I had a father who I thought was a prince, even though at times we disappointed him in terms of what we did as teenagers, as kids, with all that energy. But for the most part, I just thought, when I sit down and analyze what he gave me, the sense of comfort, the sense of safety that he gave me.
Why I do this type of work, it started out many years ago as a young lawyer handling a lot of crazy cases in the legal system, fighting for justice and trying to keep young men out of jail who were charged with crimes they didn't commit, and trying to help fathers stay out of jail for not paying child support when they were dead broke, not deadbeat, and trying to help children by re-engaging fathers and children in positive relationships. Another reason I do this, when there are other areas of law where I could probably make substantially more money, is because I have a personal interest in this. My father was an ex-offender. I'm a child of divorce. I'm a parent of divorce. I have a brother who grew up in an orphanage, and he's an ex-offender. So I have a personal interest in doing this type of work. I just didn't wake up one day and figure this is what I'm going to do. This is very important to me. When I get up in the morning, I'm all charged up and passionate about trying to change laws, write new laws, and do something to help people. My first book was entitled Father's Rights, and it was very legal. It was how to avoid becoming a target looking for an arrow. My second book, Divorce Wars, was focused obviously on divorce. This book's a lot different. This book is celebrating fatherhood, and I'm honored that Cardinal Francis George endorsed it, as well as President Obama, because they don't always agree on everything, but they do agree that fathers are parents too.
One of the things that you address in this book is new relationships, not just for the father, but also maybe for the ex, and how to deal with the ex's new relationship and how to deal with your new relationship and the kids. Tell us a little bit about your advice on that.
Well, romance is critical, especially pre-divorce. Post-divorce, it also is important, but not always as significant, because pre-divorce it could create and intensify litigation, which you don't want. But I always tell my clients, think with your head, not your heart, because you have children to insulate from any potential
relationship fallout. This is my third book, my most important book, and I'm very proud I've gotten an endorsement from President Obama, the Archdiocese. So this is more than just a legal textbook. There are psychological and spiritual components to it, but a critical question that a lot of dads ask me, do I get involved in another relationship before the marriage is finalized? And my answer is...
Wait, they need to ask you that?
Exactly.
Before the marriage is over?
Well, mothers have the same question.
Yeah.
Often divorces can drag out because of other unrelated adult relationships. And a lot of fathers ask me, what do I do? And I tell them, don't, because it could open old wounds, create new ones, and drag out the divorce even longer. So it's very dangerous. But if they absolutely want to and they refuse to give up what they consider a potential wonderful relationship, a new woman who may be their new wife if they get divorced, I tell them, be discreet, be careful, and if in doubt, check her out and make sure she's safe for his children.
And you say manage feelings of guilt. How do you do that? Why do you need to do that?
A lot of men need to do that, more so than women, because men generally blame themselves for the divorce, for the breakup. They blame themselves for everything. And a lot of men, if not in counseling, and often I recommend a good mental health professional to my clients, and I do that so they don't end up targets looking for an arrow and agree to paying more support than they can afford, or agree to losing important time with their children that can potentially destroy their relationship with their children because of guilt, and they want to be punished.
And a lot of these tips could work for women and men in going through a divorce. Control your anger is a big one.
Exactly, and that's critical, because if you don't control your anger, you could end up with police involvement, and if there's any conflict or domestic violence due to the gender bias in our system, usually the dad's going to go to jail, not the mom, and that could really mess things up.
The fathers are very, very important, and that's probably why former Presidents Bush and Clinton were focused on promoting responsible fatherhood, and that's why President Obama is focused on the issue. If you look at the statistics, father absence is having a terrible effect on American children. Father-absent children are twice as likely to drop out of school and 11 times more likely to exhibit violent behavior. And that's just the beginning. Little girls that are father-absent are more likely to become victims of abuse. So it's important that children have two loving parents, if at all possible. A number of years ago, I studied statistics on paternity litigation, and 34% of all children in America were born out of wedlock. That statistic has now increased to 41%, and it's over 50% in Chicago alone. And it's frightening. What that communicates is that many children will never know their father, will never receive child support, and many children won't know their mother either, because many of those children end up being raised by third parties other than their biological parents. Fathers are viewed as biological necessities only. Dr. Margaret Mead once stated, fathers are biological necessities but social accidents. A lot of people believe that's true, and it's having a devastating effect on our society. School violence is attributable in part and substantially to father absence. A lot of educators want more police in and near our schools. What we need isn't more police. We need fathers. We need to re-involve fathers in the lives of their children, and that will protect children and substantially reduce school violence a lot more than bringing more police into the schools to arrest our children. I recently gave a lecture at a seminar where the topic was father figures. How do we find father figures for our children? The topic should be how to find biological fathers to parent instead of kicking them to the curb. Father figures, unfortunately, I don't believe can always replace a biological father. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes the father is deceased. Sometimes the father is incapable of parenting. He may be hospitalized. But most fathers that come to me, come to my law office, are not deadbeats. They're dead broke, and they want to be in their children's lives, and they're being kicked to the curb.
Divorce and separation in general causes a lot of hostilities. Who really loses the most in those battles?
Our society, because one, the children become ultimate victims. When children are used as tools of revenge in this terrible litigation type battle, whether paternity or divorce, the ultimate victims start out with the children. And then it affects parents, and then it affects our society, because the children are the future of our society. I co-authored the joint custody law in this state, and based on the joint custody law, I am hoping to promote equal parenting. And many judges have awarded joint custody based on the law I co-authored, and it has allowed parents to co-parent instead of one parent becoming the owner of the children and the other parent being turned into a visitor or an Uncle Daddy or a Disneyland dad, which eventually ends up with many dads disappearing. And many dads are becoming an endangered species in our society, and it's very, very dangerous. I'm a big proponent of co-parenting opposed to sole parenting. But unfortunately, our system for many, many years has advocated control. One parent will control the children, and the other parent becomes a payor of child support or goes to jail. Joint custody is very, very important, because in co-parenting, parents hopefully learn to cooperate and put their differences aside and focus on the best interests of the child. Also, statistics show that fathers ordered to pay child support with joint custody pay substantially more child support than non-custodial dads or dads with no contact at all. Many children that lose their fathers feel rejected, even though it's not their fault. They've lost their dads because the legal system may not have been working, or the mother may have been engaging in parental alienation, or various other reasons. But it's not the fault of the children, but the children generally blame themselves. They feel rejected. It affects their self-esteem, and it often can lead to depression, and depression can lead to suicide. And suicide does affect father-absent children. It's a big, big problem we have in our society. Fathers can fall into a state of depression just as their children can when the father-child relationship terminates. And statistics show that father absence for fathers, non-custodial fathers with no children, is quite high in the United States, and also in Great Britain. It's 4 times as high as that for women. So suicide is substantially higher for men than women when you factor in divorce, non-custodial status, and loss of children. When co-parenting works, it helps everybody, because the focus is on the children. Fathers that are co-parenting and they're happy and they're functioning, they're not suffering from depression, are able to earn more money, to pay more support, to spend more time with their children. It benefits everybody. When a father is kicked to the curb and he loses everything that's dear to him, he loses his children, he often ends up really unable to function in the workplace. And a lot of these dead broke dads that can't find jobs or are underemployed are really somewhat dysfunctional because of the depression they're suffering because of child loss. The White House contacted me as a resource for the first roundtable and town hall meeting focused on responsible fatherhood based in Chicago. And that was a great resource. And there are many resources. My opinion is if parameters aren't necessary, that's wonderful, but often we need some parameters if the parties are divorced or never married and the relationship has disintegrated. And that's often when we need a joint parenting agreement, which states the rights and responsibilities of the parties which is very helpful in co-parenting, and that should be reviewed annually, every year, because things change. Often there's substantial changes in circumstances. A parent may be moving, or a child may end up in another school, or there may be educational difficulties or health problems. So on an annual basis, it should be reviewed, and parents need to spend quality time with their children. And it's not how much money they spend with their children, it's the time, the quality time they spend with their children. Because children, they don't want their love bought, because that causes children often to feel insecure, and sometimes that will result in children trying to manipulate their parents, and it negatively impacts boundary issues. Parents, especially divorced dads, they should not buy their children's love. They shouldn't be their kids' friends. They need to be a parent and set boundaries, discipline, but don't buy your children's love. It's usually not healthy.
I'm a big supporter of joint custody. It's an honor that I was able to co-author the joint custody law, but a lot of dads don't know there's a new joint custody law, and they believe that if mom says no, they don't get joint custody. Wrong. That's the old law. It doesn't exist anymore. I changed it.
So when people think joint custody, they think the kids are going to be with you half the time, with mom half the time. But joint custody is not that. It's this weekend arrangement, right?
Well, it depends. No? There are various forms of joint legal and physical custody. There's even one form called bird nesting, where the parents move in and out of the primary residence where the children live. But that generally doesn't work. But it can, wow. But usually it doesn't. Yeah. But the key is joint custody doesn't mean it's an automatic 50-50 split of parenting time. That would be wonderful. Sometimes that occurs, but it doesn't always occur. So fathers, dads, moms, the entire family need to know that there are different forms of joint custody, and sometimes a 50-50 split in parenting time is not best for the children. Sometimes it is. You have to know, and that's when you need a good doctor and sometimes a good psychological evaluation.
A lot of moms out there might say, you know what, it's most of the situations it's single moms raising the kids and the dads aren't doing enough. Maybe there's feelings of guilt that the dad's not involved, but what do you say to all the single moms out there who maybe the father just seems disinterested? What can the dads do to stay involved minimally, or how do you work that out?
That's something I work out often through counseling. Often dads are pushed out of the relationship. Sometimes they walk away because they feel they're worthless. They're not. I've lectured to a lot of dads who believe that they bring no value to parenting. That's absolutely wrong. And the Pope recently released a statement about absentee fathers and how critical fathers are and the beauty of fatherhood. Dr. Sigmund Freud also released a similar warning, and his daughter, who became a doctor, wrote a book on absentee fathers. This is a critical issue. It's so critical that the Pope is speaking in September at the World Conference on Families in Philadelphia, in part on this critical issue. Fathers and mothers need to work collaboratively in raising their children. Unfortunately, if that doesn't happen, then you need to get to court and make sure the children are safe.
So now, do laws in this state, or really in the country, mostly favor mothers for the most part? Is that still the case?
I believe generally they do, and that's why I've co-authored new legislation, and I've also co-authored an old law, which I'm very proud of. I co-authored the Illinois joint custody law, but basically the laws are pretty gender skewed, and then there are judges that sometimes are pro-male, pro-female, gender-neutral. So lawyers that do this type of work have to understand the judge and his or her values before determining whether to stay in front of that judge or try and file a motion for a substitution of judges.
Well, most of you do. I mean, the people that are within a certain circuit, you all know. I mean, you're very specialized, right?
Exactly.
You know all the family law
right.
judges. Okay, so everybody knows who you are, right?
Well, in Chicago, parental alienation is a terrible syndrome where one angry parent does everything possible to program the child to hate the other parent. And the ultimate victim in those situations are always the children.
Yeah, and then for people who are in that situation, what's the number one thing they should do?
React immediately. If you wait too long, every day that goes by, that child is being emotionally tormented. Often a psychologist or another type of mental health professional is necessary to deprogram the child. Parental alienation is one of the worst things a parent can do to a child, and parents have lost custody. Parents have lost normal visitation with their children because of parental alienation. So you never want to use children as tools of revenge. You always want to facilitate a positive relationship between your children and the other parent. I represented a dad recently, and his wife engaged in an adulterous relationship with her physician, and then they both started engaging in parental alienation. And I had to actually take this doctor's deposition, and I had to be pretty aggressive with him in his dep to get this case to finally settle and move into a positive direction. And I always use honey before vinegar, but here I couldn't. I co-authored a new law that makes interference with parenting time a crime in the state of Illinois, which could help a lot of joint custodial parents with parenting time. Prior to this new law going into effect, if a parent had parenting time and the other parent said, no, you're not going to see your children, you're not going to have any contact with your children, the police couldn't do anything. I've changed that, and now it's a crime, and on the third conviction, the custodial parent can be incarcerated up to a year for interfering with parenting time. Parenting time is very, very important because children need two parents. They need a mom and a dad, and this new law will help keep many, many dads from being kicked to the curb. Virtual visitation can be critical in ensuring that long-distance fathers are engaged in the lives of their children and able to communicate. There are many fathers in the military who are serving overseas. There are incarcerated fathers, disabled fathers, hospitalized fathers that may otherwise have no ability to communicate visually with their children in addition to the audio component without a virtual visitation. It's very, very important because it allows judges to order all types of electronic visitation between non-custodial parents and their children. So this could benefit military fathers in Iraq, incarcerated fathers. This could benefit long-distance dads that may be employed in another state or another country. Prior to this new law going into effect, there was no statute giving judges the power, the authority to order this type of visitation, which is essential to maintaining healthy relationships between children and non-custodial parents in our changing society. That law that I helped create enables judges to order virtual visitation for incarcerated parents, such as Skype, video conferencing, emails. And that's really, really important because a lot of families, a lot of children, a lot of mothers don't have the money to take the whole family and the children to downstate Illinois to visit dad, but they do have the ability to effectuate virtual visitation. Financially, they have the ability to do that. House Bill 236. This is a critical House bill introduced by Representative LaShawn Ford, a brilliant legislator. I have a lot of respect for him. And this is a critical bill because the purpose of this is to automatically suspend child support for incarcerated parents, which are generally dads. When you take an incarcerated person who's dead broke, unemployed, no hope, nowhere to go in the world, and then you're still obligating him to pay child support, or her, you're stealing his or her hope. And then when that person goes back into society, instead of rehabilitating the person, you're reincarcerating the person. Somebody who's incarcerated, who is obligated to pay child support based on the current law, obviously can't pay it. And they're not worried about getting locked up. They're already locked up. But the support builds up, and there's 9% statutory interest on it, which is crazy. It's crazy. You can't get 9% from a bank. So then when these men get out of prison, because generally incarcerated parents are dads, if they can't pay up, they can go back to jail. There was one man who couldn't pay up, and the judge told him, you bring your child support current or bring a toothbrush, to your next court date. Military non-custodial parents need to make sure they get into court, file a petition to reduce child support so they're protected when they're overseas, because many military fathers suffer a severe reduction in pay because civilian pay is often higher than military pay, but they don't get into a courtroom often and reduce the support. So when they're overseas, the arrearage builds up, and then when they come back to the United States, their credit can be destroyed. They could be looking at a contempt proceeding, fighting to stay out of jail for non-payment of support because they can't afford it.
And now, can they use military lawyers for that sort of proceeding before they leave?
No, because military lawyers cannot practice law in a civilian courtroom representing a soldier.
Talking about custody concerns when parents are of different faiths, this has been in the news lately, and I'm sure it's something that comes up in your practice. What are you doing to help your clients that are in similar situations?
Well, we have many clients in similar situations. For instance, I'm representing a father now who's Catholic, and the mother will not allow him to baptize their 3-year-old child. Right now we're in the process of putting a pleading together to seek the court's permission to allow our client, the father, to baptize his 3-year-old son.
So it's basically just working through those issues and realizing that there's a problem in that.
Exactly. I believe parents of different faiths need to work together when their relationships crumble, not apart from one another. I co-authored a new law in the state of Illinois to help protect fathers from paternity fraud. Under this new law, a judge has to inform the parties to the case of the right to DNA testing. A man has a right to DNA testing, and now a judge cannot order a paternity order and subsequently a child support order against a man unless the man is clearly informed of his right to a DNA test.
You told me off the air a really interesting statistic about that, about how many cases come back where the person that's said to be the father really isn't.
There was a significant study by the American Association of Blood Banks which revealed, pursuant to this study, that 30% of the men tested who were allegedly the father were not. Okay. So that means almost a third of all these men tested were not the biological dad. And this is an example of how paternity fraud hurts families and children and men.
Your name has kind of become synonymous with helping dads. I think a lot of people know all the good work you've done. And in fact, our governor is one of those people. He offered you what do they call it? A condemnation? A good thing. What? Congratulations.
Commendation?
Commendation, is that what you say? Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe they made it Jeffrey Leving Day.
Right, yeah, exactly. Get a whole day now?
This is really nice, though, from the governor.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I've worked hard chairing the Illinois Council on the Responsible Fatherhood, the Illinois Council on Responsible Fatherhood. I have to get it right. And I've been chairing it at the pleasure of the governor to make Illinois a better state for all children, because every child in every community should have a positive relationship with their children, and all communities should get equal treatment and be treated the same way.
I try to get help. I went to different lawyers, always with the same thing, the same promise. My ex-wife was breaking every single court order. Many years were going by and the same thing. I got wise, and I called the father's rights. After all these years, only took 2 months for them. The first time I went to the office, right away you can see the knowledge, the expertise. They didn't want to take the garbage from my ex-wife. Say, you know what, she's notorious to manipulate the courts and the lawyers and all that. I said, don't worry about it. We have the expertise. I couldn't believe that. 2 months only, I get custody of my son and my daughter. Wow, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. If you really care and love your kids, why are you wasting your time somewhere else? Come with the professionals. Come here. They will help you. They will help you. They are like, BAM! If you love your kids, you love your children, invest it with a good lawyer. Father's right lawyers. They are here to help you. Trust me on that. I appreciate it. My family members appreciate it. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for helping us. We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Great father and a great man.
Thank you. Thank you so much again.
The day that Mr. Levin and I were introduced to each other was on a radio, was on Jonathan Brandmeier's show, and they were people calling in telling their story of going through a divorce last Father's Day. I wasn't going to call at all. Something inside me says, Jim, you better make this call because you're at a deadlock. I did everything I could, pro se, did it on my own. I was going nowhere. My kids, you know, we fought and fought and fought trying to get custody. They went out of their way and did everything they could for me. And in return, with Jeffrey's law firm, we together are going to open up a web page. And on that web page, we're going to help more fathers with visitation. More fathers get custody. We're going to work and try to get companies like Great America and other companies to supply passes for fathers who can't afford to take their children out on to day trips and that. I am going to focus the rest of my life to help fathers get connected, stay connected, and be in control and take care of their kids. We don't want any more runaway fathers. We won't want kids without fathers. And I will stand by you for the rest of my life to see that happen. Mr. Leving, you are... Thank you very much.
Without this man, I don't know where I would be. To actually get custody or joint custody with your children, and you're fighting the system with the your ex-wife is actually a Chicago police officer. It's almost impossible to do, but he have made the impossible possible for me to have my children today. Unfortunately, they couldn't be with me today, but that's okay. They send their love. And the only thing I got to say is that I feel honored to be standing here and to be able to express how I feel about my children and how I feel about this man helping me to get my children. You know, a lot of people, as Mr. Taylor said, you know, you might give up. But that's exactly what the system wants you to do, is to give up. But if you continue to strive forward and you know that you're a better person than they actually portray you to be, then, you know, it makes it all worthwhile. As Mr. Levin, Jeff, I want to say thank you, sir. I do appreciate everything you've done for me.
I don't have to add on to how conscientious and capable an attorney Mr. Leving is. I met Jeff way back in 1983, I believe, when we have a little bit more hair on our head at that time. Since then, we have been friends, and we have been talking about fatherhood for the longest time, and eventually Jeff came up with the Fatherhood Education Institute. I believe in being a good father, and without being a good father and no fatherhood, there is no right. So, you know, Jeff believes in both, so that's why he's doing what he's doing. And I'm sure you'll keep on doing that for as long as possible, and I'll stand by you.
I want to thank Jeffrey Leving and his firm is doing a great job being patient with me. A lot was done to prevent me from seeing them, and a lot more will be done, and I'm not worried about that at all, but I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
This country needs a firm like Jeffery Leving. They stand by the fathers, and I have 3 daughters back there. I've been divorced since '95. I have sole custody. I have a grandbaby, and the things that my kids give me, gifts, and not material, just love. I just love my kids, and if it wasn't for your firm, I wouldn't have what I had.
I wouldn't have my son back right now if it wasn't for Jeffrey Leving and all of his people and everybody working behind the scenes to make everything go right.
After what he went through and the trial he went through and winning and prevailing and not giving up, he's given hope to a lot of other dads out there. Because a lot of dads have given up, and a lot of dads would not go through what he went through. And his boy now is an adult and is healthy and doing very well in life, all because Kurt wouldn't give up, and he believed in his son.
For Hey Jeff, I went through 2 attorneys. They were overwhelmed by the case, and I was glad just very, very glad to get a lawyer the quality of Jeff Leving, because two other lawyers were absolutely overwhelmed by the case. And without Jeff, I probably would have never even seen my son. And this was just a civil case, but without Jeff, it might have got way, way worse with these false abuse allegations. So I just want to thank you.
One day I was surprised with divorce papers. Suddenly I found myself locked out of my home and out of touch with my children. I realized that I would need a lawyer and a firm that specialized in representing fathers. A family member suggested the Leving firm, and it was one of the best moves I've ever made. The degree of professionalism, the degree of concern and regard and respect, these components were amazing of what I was presented with in my work with my attorneys. The Leving firm, in representing me, gave me peace of mind that enabled me to go out every day on duty on the streets and perform my role as a police officer. And I would urge anyone in my position, equip yourself with the best. Give yourself the best shot that you can in what may for you prove to be the biggest battle of your life. I would give my highest endorsement to the Jeffery Leving firm.
There's one success story that's really important to me where we represented a disabled father, a victim of a drive-by shooting, who was paralyzed, and he was denied visitation. I believe it was because the mother was embarrassed, didn't want him around his daughter. So there was no contact for years, and he was afraid to go to court. Well, we won. We reunited him with his little girl, and the reunification was really important. They were both in tears. It was really, really important. And a father, because of a serious disability, should not be denied a relationship.
What would you say to those couples right now who are watching, who, maybe have some issues communicating about how important, a day like Mother's Day or Father's Day is to really get along?
It's critical. You don't want parental conflict during Mother's Day or Father's Day or any holidays or actually any time of the year. Parental conflict is terrible for children. There are a lot of free activities in Chicago. Lincoln Park Zoo is my favorite because when I was a young dad, I used to take my daughter there all the time. She loved it, and we created lifelong memories. But the key is not just where you go, it's what you do, and it's the quality time you spend together, not the quantity time. And you have to listen and let your children know you're always going to be there for them.
Right.
That's important for stability.
And in those environments, too, are a good opportunity where you're kind of, I don't want to say you're throwing in the life lessons when they least expect it,
right,
but you can have these really sweet conversations with your kids while you're looking at the animals or you're doing things that they remember forever. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing my daughter will remember forever, when I took her to Lincoln Park Zoo and the tiger tried to jump over the moat and get to us. It didn't make it. It fell in the moat. I was outraged as an attorney and as a father to see another dad so badly hurt, pushed over the edge because of alleged parental alienation. He's basically just trying to stain his daughter's life, and now she's being used as a tool against him.
All right, so he's on the dad's side, Alex's side.
Releasing the tape is much more harmful than what Alex said. I'm a dad myself. I've said things to my own daughter I regret. If every father lost his relationship with his child because he lost his temper, every dad in America would have no contact with his child. But releasing that information and putting the child in the middle of the conflict is outrageous, because we have to focus on the rights of that child.
When you go to court, though, don't you ask a judge to seal the record so that these documents are not released and not made public?
Oh, in this type of case, I definitely would have done that. And also, if this was released in violation of a court order, as an attorney, I'd be seeking jail time. Any dad being pushed to the edge and facing the loss of his child is going to be pretty angry.
Yeah, I agree with you. This case should not be a case about two famous celebrities. This case should be about Ireland, a minor child, and her privacy needs to be respected. I mean, can you imagine her going to school? What are her classmates going to do? Make fun of her and ask her, well, why did your dad do this? Well, why did your mom do this? This is terrible. The tape should not have been leaked, and if the mother leaked it, and if her attorney leaked it, and if they're both found in contempt, I would support the court in sanctioning both of them and jailing both of them, because this is outrageous. Nobody should put the best interest of a minor child on the back burner to score points against Baldwin or any other father. And I've been representing fathers for many, many years throughout the United States, and these types of issues are not limited to this case, but this case is getting a lot of press because the parents are celebrities. There are many, many fathers in this situation and many children in this situation, and this is something that needs to stop. And I've done legislative work, I've done legal work and charitable work fighting against parental alienation, which destroys children, and it can do it permanently. Parental alienation is not gender specific, but the reason more mothers cause parental alienation is because they can, because the system allows them to do that. Our legal system is broken, and it needs to be fixed so no parent can parentally alienate a child against the other, because the ultimate victims are obviously the children, and
any parent can alienate.
Go ahead, Len.
Any parent
Catherine,
can alienate.
Any parent can alienate.
Right. Exactly. The real issue here isn't Alec Baldwin's outburst. The real issue here is protecting the best interest of Ireland, and the court is attempting to do that. And if, in fact, there is a court order directing such information not to be released, and obviously it has been released, the issue is the right of privacy for this little girl. The publication
Jeffrey,
of this
wait a
tape
minute.
surely...
Jeffrey, I'll deal with the issue of the leaked tape later. The more important question here is this man is threatening his daughter, belittling, besmirching, and threatening his daughter. First and foremost.
Well, I'll be glad to respond.
I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to come out there. You have insulted me for the last time. I'm going to straighten your blank out. I'm going to really make sure you get it. Don't you think that's a terroristic threat? I do.
It's not a terroristic threat.
Sounds like it.
It's frustration. Do you want me to respond? It's frustration. He's frustrated and he's hurt. I represent many fathers.
Why are you making excuses for him to take it out on his daughter?
He's
mad at Kim Basinger. Take it out on her.
You want my opinion? You want my opinion? My opinion is that parents lose their temper. I'm a father. I've lost my temper.
Have you ever talked to your daughter like that?
Lost his temper.
Have you ever talked to your daughter like that, sir?
No, but I have not gone through a terrible divorce, and I'm a divorce attorney, and I've represented many fathers.
I don't care how terrible it is. You are excusing his behavior, sir.
Sir, I am not condoning his behavior. My concern here is protecting this minor child from parental alienation, and I'm concerned about her right to privacy, and this tape should not have been released.
Do you think she really is going to love him after that tape?
Yes, I do. I believe they have a good relationship.
You believe that?
What we have here is we have a picture of Alec Baldwin.
Excuse me, let me see. You're a rude little pig. Oh, how old are you? 12 or are you 13? He doesn't even know how. Father of the Year doesn't know how old his daughter is.
Sir, I heard the tape, and all of your viewers heard the tape. The key here is you have a snapshot picture of a dad at his worst.
A rude little pig.
Why don't we show a
11-year-old girl a rude little pig?
Sir, why don't we show a snapshot picture of him at his best? Why don't we show a true picture of him as a father, opposed to taking a snapshot picture of him when he blew up and using that to discredit him?
Melanie,
sir, this is discrediting him, and this is not in the best interest of his child.
I can't discredit him any more than what the tape does, sir.
He made a mistake.
Can the courts adjudicate this without the father being here?
Yes, they can, and the INS has already done that. The federal government has exclusive authority in determining immigration issues, i.e., who is allowed into the United States. And the INS has made that decision, and this decision is clearly within the province of the federal government. For the state court to make a contrary decision, and the state court's contrary decision was enjoining Ilion from being removed from the jurisdiction, is blatantly unconstitutional, and it's a slap in the face of the federal government.
Do you believe that it takes Fidel Castro and his thug regime to make a father love his son? Don't you believe the father when he says, I love my son and I want to raise him now that his mother's dead? Is that hard to imagine?
It's not hard to imagine. I believe this father loves his son. But first of all, let me tell you, I am anti-Castro. I believe that Castro has stolen freedom from a lot of Cubans, but that's not a reason for us to steal a little boy from his father.
But Jeffrey,
this boy belongs with his father.
Jeffrey. Amen.
The father was the primary caretaker of the boy. This boy needs to stabilize, and if this boy doesn't stabilize, all you have to do is look at some of the statistics on pages 46 and 47 of my new book, Father's Rights, and see what happens to fatherless children. Fatherless children are more likely to commit suicide, abuse drugs, and develop behavioral disorders. And those are fatherless children that have mothers. Here's a fatherless child that doesn't have a mother.
But Jeffrey,
we need to get this boy back. In a situation like this, sacrificing for the child would be regaining and reuniting with the child. Right now, if this father wants to help his little boy, he has to focus on the stability needs of this little boy. And how would a dad like this focus on the stability needs of his little boy? The only way is through familiarity. This boy just watched his mother drown, and he needs to heal. This boy is still adrift, but not in the sea, but he's adrift among strangers in a foreign land. He needs familiarity. He needs to wake up and see his daddy who loves him, his stepmom, his half-sibling, his friends, his grandparents. They're all in Cuba. That's what he needs to heal. And if he doesn't heal, God forbid he could develop psychological disorders. He may not even reach his 7th birthday. INS agreed with my amicus brief, and I am very, very happy, and I think the child's best interests will be served. But the real issue here is nobody in the United States has standing to make any legal decisions concerning the immigration status of this young child. Nobody. Well, this is a very complicated case, and who knows, maybe the father may not have the freedom to come here, but that isn't the issue. The issue is what is in the best interest of helping this boy get through a horrible trauma. This boy just watched his mother drown. This boy is grieving. This boy needs stability. And how can this boy get the psychological and emotional stability he needs to get through this grieving process? Through familiarity. Let me talk. Through familiarity. And how can he get that familiarity? By being with his biological father, because he recognizes his biological father. Helping reunite Elaine Gonzalez with his father in Cuba was really important to me. And I looked at it just simply as a matter of reuniting a little boy with his daddy. But unfortunately, most people looked at it almost a little more clearly as what it became. It became a global tug-of-war, an international custody battle between two countries. But to me, it's always going to be about that little boy and his dad and their reunification. This appearance on CNN International was very important because my focus was promoting legislative reform and trying to motivate the Obama administration to seek financial and other sanctions against countries that are non-complying with the Hague Convention and otherwise detaining U.S. children that have been parentally abducted and kidnapped. Right now, over 2,000 children, and I believe the correct number is closer to 2,800 children, U.S. children, are being held by other countries against the will of the U.S. parent. And this is terrible. Japan is not a signatory to the Hague Convention. I know of approximately 125 U.S. children that have been taken to Japan by Japanese nationals, and I know of not one child that has been returned to the United States. I'm very, very shocked by this, and we need legislative reform. The Obama administration needs to take a strong stance against countries that are concealing, keeping U.S. children abroad, especially in violation of court orders entered in this country. I'm hoping my appearance on CNN International would pull some pressure, especially on the Japanese and Brazilian governments, to return children that need to be back in the U.S., and I hope it positively promotes the importance of children's rights.
Why doesn't paternity determine custody?
Because the system doesn't always work. And if you look at the Bahamian Code, the biological father could end up a joint guardian
with the maternal grandmother, which could confuse the case. And if that occurs, the next step for the maternal grandmother could be trying to prove the biological father is unfit and therefore try and take the child from the dad. I hope to God that doesn't happen, and I hope this case ends. Also, another possible scenario would be the biological father and the psychological father, or the alleged psychological father, litigating for custody, which is another possible scenario. I just litigated a case just like this in Chicago, and I was successful, and the court awarded custody to the biological dad, and the court stated on the record that the biological father has superior rights to any other party in the proceeding. And I believe that's the case here. I believe the biological father will have superior rights to anyone else in the proceeding, but that doesn't mean the case will end, and that doesn't mean the DNA test results will be determinative of the child's future. And I just hope we start focusing on the child's future and the rights of the dad. And if the child does, by some slim possibility, end up with the grandma, that concerns me. And the reason that concerns me is because if the child gets older and asks the grandma, well, what could you tell me something about my mother or my father, what will she say? And if she says something negative about both biological parents to the child as a custodian, I think that could be very harmful. My opinion here is the rights of the biological father are superior to the rights of anyone involved in this case. And I recently handled a case like this in Chicago where the court made that decision, and the court determined that the maternal grandmother had no standing to even seek custody, and my client, the biological dad, walked away with custody. I think this could be the outcome here, but there are problems because I have studied the legal code in the Bahamas, and even though the maternal grandmother has no right to standing to seek sole custody, there is a two-step process where she could seek joint guardianship with the biological father, and if she's successful in doing that, then she could try and bounce him out if she could prove he's unfit. I am somewhat incensed, and I definitely disagree with Ms. Cohn's opinion. I look at this as a child or children issue. The real issue here is what is in the best interest of the children, and how can those two children, a 3- and a 5-year-old boy, get some stability in their lives if they don't have it now. The issue is not a gender issue. It's not male versus female, and many people are turning this into a gender issue. The issue isn't whether or not Marcia Clark is suffering because she's working 16 hours a day, coming home approximately at 10 p.m. at night when the children may be sleeping. So if she's kissing them goodnight, they may be sleeping while she's kissing them goodnight. And the issue that she wants babysitters now for the weekends and evenings during the week when she's working, and that she wants child support possibly for matters that should be addressed in an alimony or maintenance proceeding. To me, that's outrageous. She's not there when the children need her, and if she can't be reached when somebody calls when there's an emergency, then we have a problem. Well, and based on what you're telling me, if the mother retains custody and the father remains as a non-custodial parent, there's a real good chance that the custodial parent may be a babysitter. My concern here is that if we follow what my understanding of Ms. Cohn's opinion is in this matter, we may put children in the position where they may have no full-time parents, and that is something that concerns me. In our fragmenting society, we need to ensure that children have two parents. But if we can't do that, we have to make sure they at least have one full-time parent that'll be there for them emotionally. We need at least one psychological parent.
And emotional
No, let me talk, because what you want to do is basically focus on the best interests, and I may be wrong, but this is my opinion, of women. No, not of the children.
Of the children.
You're telling me that a woman that works... You're telling me that a woman that works 16 hours a day cannot be there emotionally for the children, should automatically have sole custody. Is that what you're telling me?
No, there's nothing. Okay, I'm glad you asked me that.
Is that what you're telling me that? She's a young 20-year-old single mother without a job, trying to survive and raise a child. Basically, there's a lot of bullying, intimidating, mudslinging, he said, she said. This is all irrelevant. We need a DNA test. My opinion is, I hope to God it can be done confidentially outside of court.
with dignity for everybody, and the case hopefully will go away, because this should be hopefully a private matter going forward. Time will tell.
Okay.
But if it isn't a private matter and things blow up, the paternity action can be refiled. I wasn't surprised, but I was very disappointed, and I believe the decision is incorrect. Pennsylvania law, as I've reviewed it, is clear that only 2 adults can be responsible and liable for child support, not 3. The court's decision basically holds 3 adults liable for support, and the court cannot function as an activist court. It has to enforce the law, not change it. Laws are changed in the legislature, not on the bench. And to me, this is another example of gender bias against men in the system. Right now, this is going to affect all donors, whether they're anonymous, whether they're not, because this tells sperm donors that it's not safe to do a good deed and to help a friend or friends. This is going to cause thousands of childless couples to be unable to have children because of this decision, which I consider very, very bizarre. I believe this is clearly, in my mind, gender bias against fathers, against men, and it's wrong. I mean, Pennsylvania law is clear from my review and analysis of Pennsylvania law. Only 2 adults can be responsible for child support, not the neighbor, not the grandmother, not aunts or uncles.
Right.
Only 2
But very
adults.
importantly, is it that simple?
An adoption is one way to straighten this out. If the lesbian couple had adopted these 2 children, then there's a good chance the biological father would not be responsible for support. But the best way to straighten this out is through the Uniform Parentage Act, which has been adopted in 2/3 of the states in this country. Right. But Pennsylvania has not adopted it. So my advice to sperm donors: stay out of Pennsylvania. I don't believe it is possible for any parent to have frequent and continuing and consistent contact with the child if one parent is in California and the other parent is living in the middle of nowhere. We could find skeletons in almost anybody's closet.
And that's not in the best interest of any child.
Yeah, but I don't think a father should be denied contact with his child or lose the right to litigate
She's
custody.
not denying him contact.
Because of a battery conviction. The doctor believes that it would be difficult for the child to readjust from a daycare center where the child is spending 8 to 10 hours a day
You act like
to being
daycare
with the
center is
father.
some sort of a prison for these kids.
First of all, if you look at pages 46 and 47 of my new book, Father's Rights, I've laid out how fatherlessness impacts children.
You know, I'm tired of this guilt trip, but he's not fatherless. Bailey has a father. Bailey has a father.
Connected, consistent father. So what if the father follows the mother to the East Coast? What if his parents come with? What if his whole family, can I finish talking, please? What if the whole family comes with, and then the mother relocates again to another state?
Elena clearly believes that the cancer played a big role in the custody battle in terms of the judge's decision. Your client doesn't believe that. What do you think was the
Well,
factor?
it's not what I think. I read the trial court's decision, and the judge specifically stated that this case is not about cancer. It is about custody of the children, what's in the best interest of the children, and relocation. This judge did not make a custody decision based on cancer.
But somebody can say, I'm not making this based on cancer, but then Elena's point is, well, she cited cancer 30 times.
Well, you could say that if you believe the entire judicial system is corrupt, which it isn't, and the trial court made a decision.
I did read the judge's ruling, and the judge said, look, they're both good parents, there should be joint custody, but it's a question of the husband lives in Chicago where he has this job, he's the breadwinner, it's 700 miles away. She could get up and move, he couldn't move. She is saying, well, look, why should I have to make a decision between my health and my kids?
Well, she doesn't have to. She clearly can move to Chicago. This is a terrible economy. She has no job. He's the sole breadwinner for the family. They're still married. And if he moves to North Carolina, he'll lose his job, and then nobody has any money, and she loses her health care because my client is maintaining health insurance so she could get the important cancer care treatment she's receiving. It's very clear. The judge made the decision based on what's in the best interest of the children.
We should point out that because this is an ongoing case, Jeffrey is not allowed to talk directly to Elena or ask any direct questions. But Is your client able to take care of the kids? Is he there?
My client is not only able to take care of the kids, he's a great father, he's a loving father, and he's doing a great job. And the mom should move to the Chicagoland area and help out and co-parent.
But isn't there, I mean, there must be like a babysitter who's taking care of the kids all day while he's working.
Right. He has everything under control, but I want to address a critical issue. One of the best cancer care treatment facilities in the world is in Chicago. And she could come to Chicago and access that facility.
But isn't the babysitter basically raising the kids?
The mother, no, my client is raising the kids. And if what's he going to do? Just quit his job? She loses her cancer care treatment? They can't put food on the table?
But he is gone during the day.
Well, he has to go to work, and the children are taken care of.
But they do have a mom who could take care of them all day.
She is welcome to take care of the children, and the judge even recommended that she move to Chicago and do that. All I could say is the mother here would be an excellent publicist because she's put a spin on this that has captured the intention of the whole audience.
What is the spin? She's
You're
a good mother.
Former judge.
Yes,
and
I am.
if you read that trial court decision, you know what the real reason was why for the custody decision. First of all, the judge decided that the mother was the least likely parent to encourage frequent and continuing contact between the children and the dad, the other parent.
The judge did say that the husband was more likely to encourage contact with the other parent.
Right, and you know, Anderson, unfortunately, that's one of the things that courts look at greatly.
And after the case, the judge came up to me and talked to me privately. And he said, Jeff, why are you wasting your time doing this work, representing these fathers? A lot of lawyers will think it's strange. Why don't you do something else where you could really build a reputation and really make some big money because you're a good trial lawyer. You're wasting your skills. And I just was shocked. Any man's loss of a child diminishes mankind. And that's what's happening right now. I told him the worst type of failure is not to try.